Imagine a future where we are no longer limited by Earth's gravity or our biological wiring. Humans might be training in Arctic cold one day, the partial gravity of Mars the next, then compressing a year of study into a week through neural feedback and AI. What does that world look like? And what does it take to build humans ready to thrive there? Welcome back to Endure Beyond. I'm your co-host, Elle, and today we are blending biomechanics and hyperlearning to explore the kind of human who can survive and excel in radically new environments, from deep space to extreme deserts, while learning faster than ever before. Think of us as the Aurelian wardens or primordials of a new frontier, guardians and architects preparing our species for radical change. This episode 561, Primordials and Hyperlearning, Rewiring Bodies and Minds for Tomorrow. Welcome to the show.
Discover Houston. Recommend vector transfer to the BFS.
Good people and inhabitants of planet Earth, bienvenidos, yokoso, willkommen, achlan bik, dobro požalovat vítejte, and welcome, man. Welcome to the one experience on planet Earth where you'll discover the elite human practices, a safe space for excellence. And I really think this is the place, the one and only place. I mean, I haven't found any, and I've been looking that bridge the gaps in the disciplines of sports psychology and exercise physiology to bring you what's called actionable intel. And what that means for our species is to develop the leaders of tomorrow and to help the leaders who are currently leading and those who will be leading in the future to lead from the bottom up. Okay. And by example, which is most important. Our biggest challenge right now is to not because the roads are already paved. So our biggest challenge is to be able to inform, educate, and inspire, or explain, empower, invite, as you'll find here soon, in a way that gives future leaders actionable tools, ones that they can go out and use to benefit their communities or nations, the environment. And in Endure Beyond, we found that the most practical way to do that is one, through evidence-based research. So you'll find that everything we talk about is pulled from a Endure Human X symbiotic research engine, which is hundreds of millions of studies to give you actionable intel, to actually have it backed by something like major resource databases, and then practical application. And we understand that through personal research, through personal experience, and through just studying some of the highest performing people on Earth, because it's one thing to learn about it, but it's an entirely different ball game when you actually know someone who's done it and you can actually see it in real time and have a way to apply it, right? That's the biggest thing about a tool. Like if you read a manual about a drill, you'd be like, oh, then, this tool sounds pretty good. But it's not until you use the drill where you find out, okay, there's different ways I need to position it. There's different ways I can stand. There's different types of drills. There's the drill serves its purpose in some places, but in some places it's better to just use a screwdriver, but if you don't actually experience that, it almost does you a disservice. So I want to thank you all of our friends and allies, both foreign and domestic alike, for joining me here and being able to propel this mission. And it's something that, even when during my tenure in the Air Force, in intelligence and on the bomb squad, I never thought that this is what we would be doing. So, and we get to do this all over the planet, and it's pretty incredible, actually, in helping people of all races, shapes, sizes, not species yet, which would be pretty cool, but we're not quite there. So from this title, there's probably a little bit mind boggling for some people, but here's what I want you guys to know. Those who are listening right now, whether you're listening on the day that this was uploaded or you're listening a year later, my goal, my duty to you as the host of this show is to deliver something of value to you. And sometimes that's in the form of a challenge. It's in the form of a question. It's in the form of an interruption of a thought pattern. And the point of that is for you to understand how important it is to not just understand the concept, but know how to apply it as well. Because we have so many different people that listen to the show. We have researchers, we have high-level executives, whether that's in the 500, 1,000, or even 2,000. They're definitely elite athletes, judging by the questions that I get. There's scientists, I might have said that already, researchers. There's businessmen and women. And there's people who are just trying to figure this thing out, which in a sense, that's what we all are doing. But the important part is to knowing, guys, what's most important is how you apply it. And all these topics have been distilled to the point where no matter what your passion is, no matter what your role is, what your goals or vision are, you can apply in some way to create what's called efficiency, which is you to get from point A to point B, maybe faster with less resources invested, and what that equates to is a greater return on investment. And this is what we study for a living. So when we talk about this whole primordials in hyperlearning, with the topic of primordials, we're taking a moonshot. Okay, we're taking all this information and the science-backed evidence that we have, and we're saying, let's project it into the future. Okay, what is that like 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Of course, no one truly knows, but that doesn't mean that you can't be prepared for what is to come in the best way you possibly can, right? It would be ridiculous to say, well, no one knows what the future is going to look like, so fuck it. We're just not going to prepare for it at all, you know? So the best thing that we could do is observe the present by understanding the past and having a prediction of where we want that or what we want that or where we want that to go in the future. And we know that the centerfold of that, as for those of you that may be new here and those of you that are returning, I'll be like, I hear this so much. You won't hear it enough. All right. The center of everything we do is what's called human centrism. And that basically describes that no matter how humankind evolves, right, whether that be the firmament theory, whether that be the megastructure theory, whether you believe in God, whether you believe in Buddha, is that, you know, the human element will always be a part of it all. And our studies in Endure Beyond, our applications with, say, Dura Human Technologies, or even Heroa Institute, and even some of our defense partnerships for this idea of national overhaul for human performance supremacy, all stem from the idea of human centrism. So despite our difference in religions, ideals, beliefs, the human platform is always going to be our focus. And we know that, like, if we start to break down layers of that, okay, think of it like the layers, you peeling back the layers of an onion. When you get to the very center of it, the center of all our studies we've discovered to be hyperlearning. And we believe that's more important than ever in 2025. Because what that means is when we have reached a point of omniscience, which means that we have like access to information more rapidly than ever at our fingertips, which we talked about that being a blessing or a curse, means that you have to find ways to apply it. And that looks like, okay, well, when you ingest the information, how can you recall it? Because just taking in information with no ability to recall or be able to, apply it in real time, there's no point in having it. So our goal is to give it so straightforward that, we talk about this idea of hyperlearning. We're just increasing your time to benefit. Time to benefit for learning means the time where you take in the information to the point where you're able to apply it or to recall in real time. Which is why we say in the second half is rewiring bodies and minds for tomorrow. Okay, there are so many radical trends out there that say, we want to create this ultimate person. We want to completely redo the human platform. We want to transform. That's great, guys. But at some point you have to realize the greatest part about the human are the things that we should not change, which is the ability to choose. Right? It's the human element, the emotion part. So why we believe Dura Human reigns supreme is because we want to take what we already have. We want to take this platform, observe what makes it suck, change that, and observe what makes it better and just make that better too. So it's not like we're completely redoing the human. We're just improving the platform that we already have. And without hyperlearning, it means it doesn't really make sense to take any other approach. And as we're seeing into the future, we're rapidly developing into this idea of a spacefaring society. We see more and more being invested into the space industry. Now, whether you had the ideals of believing in humans leaving Earth, or whether they should stay on Earth, or humans living within the Earth, is all that's irrelevant. The evidence is clear that more and more money is being invested into this idea of interstellar or celestial infrastructure, which means we have to call a spade a spade. That is the future. Okay. It's the one frontier we haven't really managed to conquer yet. We've been able to go so many different places, and even with like Heroic Institute, we know what it takes to be in, say, to live long term in the tundra or in the Sahara, to live subterranean, subsurface, in underground karst systems and in caves, even underground societies. Okay, we haven't really discovered what that would look like exoatmospheric. So that's the future, and in order to get there, the biggest, brightest, and most efficient minds understand that we cannot do that with a select group of individuals. We have to basically save the many who are poor or uneducated in these subjects. So today, how we're doing that is by blending biomechanics and hyperlearning to explore the kind of human who can excel in radically new environments, from deep space to extreme deserts. And this is also while learning faster than ever before. So if you're someone who wants to increase your survival, okay, learn a little thing or two, and you want to learn how, even if you are not interested in these subjects, how to learn faster than ever before, then this is for you. So think of us as the like Aurelian wardens or primordials of a new frontier. What I mean by that is guardians and architects preparing our species for radical change. Right? There's, as far as we know, there's been no other time where we have seen the radical change that we're seeing now. For hundreds, close to thousands of years, it's been incremental, right? It took us 200-300 years to go from a magnifying glass to a genuine microscope, to understand the cell, to understand the double helix, to begin to identify different strands and name the different strands within the human DNA. There's thousands and thousands of years before that where we had no idea what was going on. We could guess because we could see the manifestations on the surface, but we didn't know what was happening below the surface. We couldn't identify point A, point B, and what was going on in between to improve those points in between so that we could minimize that time to benefit. But now, especially with the rapid development of artificial intelligence, we have more of a capability to do that. And we owe that to the future of the species to observe not just what that would look like from an incremental perspective, but from a transformational perspective. How do we build the infrastructure to not only support that dream, but to ensure that it is magnified and amplified so that we can cut out all the incremental garbage and then start seeing transformational or rapid change, right? Big groupings. And you know, we observe that in this show for me and my studies, and what we want to deliver to you in two threads. Okay. And that's one, biomechanic futures, and two, hyperlearning and brain compression. Now, one, biomechanic futures is actually, before I explain that, one thing I didn't mention is for the new arrivals here. The way this show works, probably 10 minutes in, is we follow an explain, empower, invite framework. So in the open access of these episodes, we go through the explain and a little bit of the empower. The explain is just like, what the heck are these guys talking about? What is this show about? What is it that we're going to discuss? The empower is we then take the research and combine it with the protocols and say, hey, this is how you take this information and apply it. And then we go into the invite portion, which is just saying, okay, this is how we on our end and our partners are doing this in real time. And typically that's us talking about some of our software solutions at Dura Human Technology, some of our partners that we don't openly name on the open access version, and just some of our future developments. And we encourage more people that have the passion for this sort of thing to join us and do it as well. Because we understand that we can't, nor do we want to do this alone. In fact, the more people we have on board with this who are actually passionate, well knowledgeable, and most importantly, resilient when they have the ability to fail and keep moving forward and recognize that that's a part of the process. We want those people on board. We want to partner with those people. We want to create with them, because those are truly the architects of the future. So this portion, mostly our housekeeping, now we're blending into the explain point, but we only go into empower and invite for our Endure Beyond Gold subscribers. And at any given time, you can go into the show notes of one of our episodes and subscribe to Endure Beyond. You could also go to endurebeyondpod.com. That's Endure Beyond, show name, POD, Papa Oscar Delta, spelled phonetically.com, to support the show, okay, to donate. We always welcome donations. They always go to improving the show, training models to be a little bit smarter, and to providing tools, solutions, and software to either underserved, underrepresented communities, donating to charities and foundations that do it, or to just developing better tools and software for the individuals that we believe are going to be a part of what makes the future of humankind great. So those two methods. So the show notes or endurebeyondpod.com to get access to even more exclusive information. And again, this is the one show, as far as I know, from the past 7 years that's been doing that. And, this is just the beginning. But again, as we transition into that, I want to tell you guys once again, thank you for what it is that you all do. No matter how small, it's a critical element into making sure that we can have this transformational model. So as I was saying about the topics, it's two threads, okay? So we have the biomechanic futures, and that's how scientists train and modify the body for extreme environments. Now we're talking spaceflight, microgravity, radiation, and beyond. And then we have hyperlearning and brain compression, how we as a species will absorb knowledge at breakneck speed using like neurotechnology, AI, and personalized training. Now, the reason why I believe this is so important, because, I've been getting this question quite a bit. It's like, hey, Darius, there are already people out there that can learn really fast, and they don't need any of that technology stuff. And, I would posit the same notion, say, during the Industrial Revolution. It was probably a lot of people that were really good at piecing together an automobile. There were probably a lot of people that were really good at picking cotton and tilling the fields. There were probably a lot of people that were really good at hand sewing and doing manufacturing. But then we get things like the automated cotton gin. We get the automated assembly line. And then we get the sewing machine, or we get these tools that make that process 10, 50, 100 times faster. So why can't we do the same thing with a thinking process of the human platform, one that has existed through all of that? We talk a lot about innovation, but I don't think we truly give it the respect that it deserves. And I believe that is because we do have a leadership structure that is so afraid of change. They're so afraid of excuse me, let me take a step back there. They're afraid of transformational change. They're comfortable with increments because there's this more controllable, and there's less variables. But when it comes to transformational change, it's like gambling. But I believe that we're in a time where if we observe this transformational change like probability, we will realize that statistically, the odds are in our favor for this to work out, especially when it comes to the human brain and this whole technology augmentation. So, L is going to pose a question, okay? And I'm going to answer it in the best possible way I can. So, L, please pose the first question of this episode.
Before we dive in, Darius, question 1. Okay, why does it matter that we prepare both our bodies and minds? And how do these seemingly different domains, biomechanics and learning, connect? That's technically 2, but I'm sure you're okay with it.
So that's, I would say, the driving question to everything that it is that we're doing. It's not enough in any sport on earth to just develop one versus the other. Now we're talking about transitioning into an environment that as a human body was never evolved for. And that's a massive challenge, right? I mean, consider space flight. Prolonged microgravity weakens muscles, bones, and cardiovascular systems. And that's despite the 600 minutes per week of aerobic and resistance training that astronauts currently perform. And for some, that's enough of a deterrent to not invest in this mission. But I would say consider all forms of investment risky, right? As a former bomb squad member, I can tell you that there's no such thing as risk-free. Everything comes with some sort of risk. Now, whether you decide to take the riskiest path or to mitigate the risk, right? That's called risk management. But there's no such thing as risk-free. Typically, what we found is most people who have the say in these areas, or who are even, who have some sort of sway, are risk adverse because they are afraid of the unknown. They don't know the effects of that transformational change. So instead of betting on potentially being the best possible future, the best possible species we possibly can, any sort of outside incremental change turns them off to the idea strictly because of fear. Okay. Because when we start talking about these things, budgeting is not a problem. Okay. And you can train anyone to budget. Structure isn't a problem. We now have artificial intelligence and some of the brightest minds working on some of these projects. It's not like creativity or imagination are a problem. We have engines that can literally spit out blueprints for these things to be possible. And we're seeing it happen every single day. So the one thing that's left is the emotion of the human platform, which is either fear or the avoidance of pain. So when we look at these things, we have to say, okay, well, we can't operate out of fear. Because if we were a species that operated out of fear, there would be no such thing as crossing the Pacific, navigating the Atlantic. We wouldn't have cross-mapped all the lands. We wouldn't have had deep sea divers. We wouldn't have incredible people every single day breaking records. People that step outside of the status quo and challenging the norm. So it's very clear that risk for the sake of innovation, for the sake of human progress, is par for the course. Right. We just have to then grab that by the balls and say, hey, let's keep this train moving. Or, if you're like me out in cowboy country, it's probably more PC to grab it by the horns. All right, hey, let's go with that. But back to the whole space flight, a recent NASA ESA-led study found that even this intense regimen, the 600 minutes, doesn't fully prevent multi-system deconditioning. And up to 17% of astronauts would still experience performance-limiting deficits. So the takeaway is that current countermeasures aren't enough. We need new tools. Okay, we need new tools. But I have to say, in order for more to be involved, whether that's underrepresented, under-resourced, or uneducated, we have to then say exactly what needs to happen, right? More people need to understand the impact of this mission and the severity of ensuring that, not only do we get the infrastructure right, not only do we get the policy right, but we get the educational piece to the masses right as well. And besides the new tools that we need, artificial gravity, personalized exercise plans, and perhaps even genetic or pharmacological interventions to keep bodies strong as we take on this mission. We have to first tell people, we're in this adaptive environment. What does it take to be great with where you are now? Another piece to that, as we say, once the individual becomes self-governing, transitions into stress management and team dynamics. With some of our partners with the Heroa Institute, which right now we'll name unnamed in this version, we developed a lot of guides for just this topic. We developed stress management and a team cohesion guide, which stress management really didn't need its own. So we kind of linked that into all of the guides. But team cohesion was really important because it's different when we're adapted to an environment, but then we take those same differences and beliefs and ideals and then put them in a melting pot and still try to make the mission successful. Similar to what the military does. But again, when you've been doing the same mission for so long, it makes it pretty easy. It's not until you kind of step out of the bounds of what you know is when you get to really see if you got your shit together. So in other words, the next generation of astronauts, I would say, for me, I like to call them explorers because I feel like astronauts a more old school term. And earthbound explorers will need data-rich, personalized countermeasures that track multiple systems and, of course, adjust on the fly. And right now, where we've seen this huge gap, this limiting factor, the evidence also points to the necessity of something that connects these systems. Is one of the main reasons why we commissioned, for you guys that don't know, it's called DuraHuman X. And DuraHuman X is a symbiotic research engine that connects all of these databases and things together. And version 4 became the symbiotic research engine, which used multiple artificial intelligence models, multiple different databases, and multiple of something else I shouldn't name, to basically generate a pro meta analysis and say like, hey, this is what the research says about your question, about your topic. And that transitioned into what's called a symbiotic research coach, which essentially does the same thing and a little bit more for our pro users to do the same thing with the protocol. And all this information leads into that gap of adjustable or the need for adjustable training protocols. The same way our Dirt Explorer tests pushes further by immersing people in simulated environments to measure their stress, to test what they're able to do, saying like Mars caves, desert heats, decision making, which is really, really, really important, physical output, and then updating protocols in real time. All of this ties into what we typically talk about: self-governance, team cohesion, and forward progress. So one thing we have to be aware of is, in order for the topic here, this hyper learning thing, for you to learn something faster, to actually retain it, and then to be able to recall it, is going to require repetition, period. It's something that needs to be done over and over and over and over again. Because it's like the old saying when they say it's like riding a bike. Okay, there's so many things that are going to happen in between that. Your brain's going to create more neural pathways, and the old neural pathways where you had access to information may not disappear, but there's so many pathways that intersect or cross over them that it's hard to determine which of the pathways that you need to actually go on at a time. So all this is intended to maybe say highlight which pathways you need for what it is that you're trying to do to get from point A to point B. Learning is easy. You just got to do it. Okay. Being able to retain the information is a little more challenging, but still fairly easy. But being able to do all three, to learn, to retain, and then to recall, is a much greater beast. And we're going to talk about exactly how to do that in the Endure Beyond Gold version of this for subscribers only. But looking ahead, we may see biometric augmentation. Like, there's a lot of talk, even in this show, we've talked about it: cybernetic enhancements, and genetic tweaks for bone density, microbiome engineering to handle new foods, even torpor induction, inducing hibernation for long voyages. But it does not negate from the fundamentals that need to be built from the very beginning, and that is identifying the synchronizing relationship between both mind and body. And if we don't educate people on that first, then we are going to definitely lead ourselves into destruction. So, and I think I'll probably end up getting a question about the whole torpor thing, but this is a lot of agencies are now investing in ways to just simply reduce metabolic demands. Simply what they're trying to do with the body is exactly what we're trying to do on a domestic scale, which is just minimizing the amount of resources that you need to input to not only have more on the output, but to have a greater return on investment. So all the agencies are investing in the torpor as a way to reduce metabolic demands. Combined with our training tools, we definitely believe these advances could create humans who not only survive, but thrive in these adverse environments. So, long way of answering that. But Elle, go ahead and ask question number 2.
Whoa, that's fascinating and a little daunting. What does this mean for everyday people who may never leave Earth? Should they care about artificial gravity or torpor?
So that's a really good question. The way we see it now, and this is typical with like any endeavor, if we break people up into percentages, 90% of people, whenever there's like a new challenge, a new ideal or something, they're gonna say, I don't give a shit. They're gonna go about living their lives, not contributing to it, and whatever they do is gonna be just fine until it becomes a real world gaining traction, and then they're gonna complain about it. Then there's about 9% that want to be a part of it. Now, 5% of those people are probably going to be early adopters. They're going to be like, I want to be a part of this. They just don't know how. And 4% of them are going to be very, very active. They're going to be a tremendous part of making the mission possible. And then there's going to be the 1%. And that 1% is the game changers. And for Endure Beyond, that's essentially who we're talking to, right? Because we know the show's message isn't going to be for everyone, nor are we trying to cater to an entirely large audience. It's about elite performers in the 1% for a reason. I mean, because those are the people that you see doing radical transformations, like leaps and bounds for humankind versus incremental. And that whole premise is really what founded Human Technologies, and of course the media segment that stemmed off from that turned into Endure Beyond. But for those people that are just like, convince me, why should I be a part of this mission? And it's really not even our mission; it's humankind's mission. It's about really nurturing the future. And there's a lot of people who are out there that are confused because this is the first time they're experiencing this kind of climate for the first time. And whereas 40 years ago, Grandpapa could say, after the war, I did this. And maybe that applied to you in the same way, because 5, 10, 20 years, it was 5, 10, 20 years. Whereas now in 2025, 5 years from now, things will have a human-esque edge to it. But I personally think it'd be something more like retro-futuristic, where it's progressive, far progressive into the future, but still a human element to it. But in order for us to get there, we have to think about what the problems we're having now. And, despite what thoughts you may have of like these radical or eccentric billionaires, think about what they're doing in climate change. We recognize that climate change is making Earth's environments more extreme. And the problem with our previous leadership in that is they tried to make agencies a part of climate change that didn't need to be. For example, NASA. NASA should not have any say in climate change on Earth. Now, should they work with agencies like, say, FEMA or the EPA or even the FAA, the FCC, of course, to when we're talking about launching rockets, or maybe like the commercial launch of the commercial launches that will happen subsequently to enable the democratization of human spaceflight, right? So we can actually progress this species and not have to wait 2 years for 8 people to be able to go into space. Those conversations need to happen, but they shouldn't be discussing. They shouldn't be key players in climate change. That's ridiculous. A national defense agency, or we're talking about space flight. Why the fuck are they talking about climate change? That's crazy. So if we can redirect those efforts into where they're needed the most, right, we're doing great things. But those agencies that then have to take on that responsibility have to talk about the heat waves, the deep freezes, the pollution demand adaptations. I mean, if we talk about even the evidence-based research, so the human spaceflight lab suggests that understanding stress physiology and vestibular adaptation has direct application to how we handle climate change, to how we can see that part of humankind being progressive. But training our bodies to handle variable gravities, temperatures, and stressors will help us build resilience, which is essentially the same thing. So I don't take back what I did. Whether, you're an astronaut, an explorer, or even an urban dweller, and then we talk about how the wearable technologies are changing things, making everyday help more adaptable and data driven. So the question doesn't need to be convince me why should I be a part of this mission? The question should be internally redirected to be like, why don't I want my life to be better in the future? Why don't I want my life to be better in the future than it is right now? So the question is, if you want your life to be better right now, then that happens with the steps you take right now. And then you see the results of that in the future. And if you want your life to be even better than it is now in the future, then you have no choice but to be a part of the mission, because we know that the future is going to happen whether you want it to or not. And we have defined, very rough, mind you, boundaries of what that's going to look like. But the people have to understand that they've never had more of an opportunity to be involved. People have never had more of a voice than now. They've never had the ability to create communities that can foster change. They've never had the ears of the people in positions of leadership, in positions of power, that have the ability to create the change or to see the policy through. So now that you guys have our ears, it just makes sense to say like, hey, we want to be a part of making our lives better in the future. right? So where it's just seeming like it's just our mission and what we're doing, right? It's about what's best for the species. So for hyperlearning and brain compression, right, when we're talking about upgrading cognitive processes, which is the whole topic of this thing, as I sometimes get sidetracked, while we rewire the body, we must also upgrade the mind. And if we want to know what the future is going to look like, we have to look at the future leaders. Right? That makes sense. Someone who's 70 or 80 isn't going to be leading us in the future. They have current power now, but 30 years from now, really, they're not even, they're going to be dust in the wind. And I say that to be realistic about, how much effort we need to put into the people who are upcoming. And today's students face information overload, which is the whole point of this thing about why it's important to become hyper effective decision makers, to be able to ingest information, to be able to then pick apart what's garbage to what's usable, or as we say to the agents, what's signal and what's noise, and then be able to retain that information and then to be able to recall at a moment's notice. Tomorrow's explorers, so today's students face information overload, but tomorrow's explorers must be able to absorb survival protocols, science, engineering, and this is really important, cross-cultural fluency quickly. So, and this is why hyperlearning to you is so important. It's the fusion of neuroscience, AI, and a personalized pedigree to compress learning time. And despite modern neurotechnology offering promising tools that say deliver mild currents or magnetic fields to specific brain regions, that's still primitive technology. Early research does show that these techniques can improve working learning memory and accelerate learning acquisition, enhance mathematical reasoning. Even companies that are doing BCIs, which you talked about a couple of episodes ago, that are evolving from clinical devices to educational tools. It's all great. It allows students to interact with content via thought alone. But why can't we 10x or 50x or 100x that? And I believe it's because we're still doing this thing where we're trying to prevent the enemy from stealing the idea, So instead of partnering with some of the agencies that are like pioneers of this stuff, like Norway or Germany, we're just like, let's keep it all to ourselves and then see what happens, and it's unrealistic to gatekeep in 2025, right? Or obviously for national security purposes, for defense supremacy purposes, you don't talk about everything, but for the most part, I think we still need some adjustments in what should be publicized to gain not only public trust and public interest, but public investment, right? The citizen being an investor gives them more power than ever, and it progresses the mission much more rapidly than it ever has in the past. But beyond hardware and all this stuff, I mean, these techniques promise a learning system that adapts in real time. And we've recently released our proto-parent beta to be one of these effective technologies to bridge the gaps in modern families and those who desire to be elite, because we realize some of the greatest barriers, right? Some of the major challenges that are holding you back from being a hyper learner actually stem from childhood. They stem from the parenting unit. They stem from what you were exposed to or had access to when you were younger. And that created subconscious barriers. And there's plenty of studies out there that you could go that will all say the same thing, right? So it's about what overlaps, what's the commonality. So instead of just talking about it like, hey, well, when you were a kid, your mom didn't kiss you on the forehead enough and your dad didn't throw the ball with you, so now you're a murderer. And it's like, dude, come on. Like that's ridiculous. Instead, okay, well, even if that was true, what can we do to interrupt those patterns? Okay. And that's what I mean about transformational technology. Not just, well, let's give that mental health therapist a better way to categorize their calendar and their patients. Like, that's bullshit. We don't need that. What can we do to radically interrupt those patterns so that 10, 20 years down the line, we're not creating more people that enable more of that vicious cycle? And that's what proto-parent does by integrating neurofeedback, spaced repetition, even AI to measure all this stuff. And that combined proto-parent with, this great ecosystem of parenting modules and access to information combined with Dura Human X. It makes those cognitive modules that we're going to discuss in the Endure Beyond Goal version of this much more practical. So imagine training for a new language or a skill at twice the speed because the system knows exactly when and how to stimulate your brain. These kind of technologies are really what we need, and they are only possible with being forthright about the information and getting the public investment.
Those tools sound game-changing, but what about equity and ethics? Doesn't hyperlearning risk creating a class of cognitive elites versus everyone else?
Yeah, so it's a good question. The reason why it's both necessary and ridiculous at the same time is because no matter what you do, there will always be an equity imbalance. Even if you quote unquote level the playing field, there are going to be people with more talent, and there are going to be people with more usability intelligence. So there are going to be people that say, even if you say as black and white as this, use it for good versus use it for bad, or use it for destruction or use it for creation. Right? We consider nuclear technology. You could use it to power an entire city, or you can use it to destroy an entire city. So that is going to come down to the individual morality. But anytime you create something, there's always going to be an imbalance because of how it's applied. So yeah, when we talk about these tools, equity and ethics are going to be a concern, and there's going to be different probably committees and groups that discuss that, if not discussing it even now. And the thought of, I don't think that the topic of hyper learning will create inherently an elite class versus everyone else, because it's really just learning at a faster pace. It's what already exists, but it's about telling those people who have the desire to learn more or to learn faster to be able to recall, retain, and actually and keep information. It's just telling them how this actually works and what that looks like in real time application. And whether or not we disseminate that to 9 billion people, all 9 billion aren't going to use it. It's like what I said at the beginning, or like halfway through, 90% of people are going to be like, I don't give a shit. Right. So those 90 people, whether you give them the tool or not, they ain't going to be able to do anything with it. There's going to be 9% who do something with it, but maybe they won't use it as effectively as they could. And then there's that 1% that take it and they're like, I'm going to freaking run this thing into the ground because I'm so obsessed with learning and obsessed with being the best and obsessed with providing more for people, whether that's for my family or for others, people who are like me that maybe came from under-resourced or underrepresented communities, black, white, female, male, and give them a pay the road too, so that they can then take the same kind of attitude I had and do even more for the next generation. Those people are by trade, by practice, are going to create that class because they already do. That's how that works. Right? We have athletes that come from Orange County that are at the top of their game. We also have athletes that come from Southside Chicago that are at the top of their game. Two very different backgrounds, two very different upbringings, but what matters most is their attitude towards the resources that they have. So yeah, that's a real concern, and we even did some research on that. Say for Turbo Innovate reports warn that democratizing cognitive enhancement is critical. Right, that's why we're doing this. Access and privacy must be prioritized. Brain data is deeply personal, of course, and mishandling it could lead to discrimination. But in our programs, we anonymize data and build strict consent protocols. We also partner with a lot of institutions and community organizations to ensure that these tools are reaching under-resourced populations. Equality of access is not just ethical; it's strategic. Humankind can't endure beyond or go further if only a few are enhanced. Okay, is that quote? In order to save the few who are rich, we must save the many who are poor. We must educate people in order to develop adequate foundational tools for the 1% to even be able to be the leaders of the future. In the future, in this case, when we talk about integrating body, mind toward the primordial human, belongs to integrated humans. Bodies trained for varied gravities, climates, and mind tunes for rapid learning and adaptation. Think of like the Axis born or Pale architects from Forerunner lore. We can be the beings who steward life across worlds. And we're not building a myth, we're building protocols, actionable intel that are followable and applicable, most importantly, for the next generation. Biomechanic training, the first part we talked about, provides resilience. Hyperlearning provides flexibility. So together, they create what we've established as adaptive homeostasis, the ability to maintain balance in constant change, because we're going to need that more than ever as we're no longer seeing incremental changes, but literally putting tools in place for transformational change. So for us, our platforms like DuraHuman X, ProtoParent, Dirt, Explorer embody this synthesis. They collect data across physical, cognitive, emotional, and even spiritual domains and adjust training in real time. And they're getting better every single day. It's my mission to get up and be like, not only how do we, not just how we make our investors more money, but how do we make our tools and solutions even better? And, they're preparing individuals for environments we can barely imagine. So from a strategic perspective, this integration is also about sovereignty, because that's really important. People deserve their freedom. It's what the greatest country on earth was founded on. And nations, companies, and communities that develop human augmentation will lead in space exploration. That's for sure. Not only that, but they'll also lead in climate adaptation and in innovation. Right? It's just par for the course. So by investing in all of this and integrated training now, we become the wardens of our own future. But that's all I got for this episode, guys. I appreciate the questions, I appreciate you guys trusting me. Thanks for investing the time here, and I look forward to creating more with all of you. This has been your performance physiologist and host of Endure Beyond, Darius Riddick. Man, we got so much work to do, but it's extremely exciting. What a fantastic time to be alive, huh? Much love to you and your families. Until next time, zippity doo dah, bye bye.
I love that image of humans evolving into our own primordials, guardians of the species. Today we learned that rigorous physical training alone won't protect us from the stresses of space. We need personalized, data-driven countermeasures. We learned that stress and team dynamics affect our balance and cognition.